She didn't even look up from her phone when she mocked him, but he looked at the piano like it used to be alive. The marble atrium of Andar Records gleamed like a temple that had forgotten how to breathe. Light spilled through the tall glass panels, refracting off the polished floor in sharp streaks of gold and white. Each click of Sloane Wilder's heels echoed with authority, cutting through the silence like a baton striking time. She was everything the world expected from a self-made CEO. Crisp navy blue suit, sleek blonde hair tucked into a controlled bun, a Breguet watch hugging her wrist like a silent warning. Don't waste her time. In her right hand, her phone danced between urgent messages and impossible expectations. She didn't notice the janitor at first. He was crouched in front of the grand piano that stood at the heart of the lobby, gently polishing the carved legs like they were sacred relics. It was a Bluthner, imported, antique, and untouched since the company acquired it. No one ever played it. It was more sculpture than instrument. She glanced up, vaguely annoyed by the interruption of movement, but something about the way he moved caught her attention. There was reverence in his hands, a pause in her scroll, a tilt of her head. Then, without warning, she spoke. "If you can play Chopin's Nocturne, I'll marry you." It was careless, the kind of remark you toss into an empty hallway when you think no one important is listening. A joke, a flex, a way to remind herself that she was still above the world she walked through. The man paused but didn't look up right away. When he finally did, she saw his eyes. They were green-gray, the color of moss under a storm, tired and calm at the same time. He didn't laugh, didn't look offended. He simply blinked, then turned back to his cloth, finishing his motion across the polished lid, as if brushing away the words she'd just thrown at him. She stood there a moment longer, unsettled. Then she walked away. But her footsteps didn't sound as certain as before. That night, the building emptied out like it always did. The lights dimmed, the lobby returned to silence, and the man returned to the piano. No one else saw it. The cameras would record the moment, but no one would watch it. He didn't open the lid. He just sat down, rested his hands gently on the keys, not pressing, not playing, like someone placing a palm on the chest of someone they used to love, listening for a heartbeat that might still be there. In his mind, music returned, not from memory but from somewhere deeper, somewhere more painful, somewhere alive. Sloane didn't know why she remembered it the next morning. She had board meetings, licensing deals, 3 artists threatening to break contract, and a PR storm brewing over a misquoted lyric. But all through the day, between emails and deadlines, the image of the janitor's hands on that piano haunted her. It wasn't attraction, it was recognition. She called her assistant. "Who's the night janitor?" "Malcolm Hayes, ma'am. Been with us almost 5 years. Works quietly. No issues on record." "Does he have family?" I'm not sure. Do you want me to?" "No. That's all." She hung up. And that evening, she came back. He was kneeling again, this time cleaning the brass pedals beneath the piano. His shirt sleeves were rolled just enough to reveal lean forearms, lined with old scars and a quiet strength. Sloane stood nearby. She wasn't in her usual suit. No heels, just soft flats and a gray coat that somehow made her look smaller. "I said something stupid yesterday," she began. "About Chopin." He looked up. "I was arrogant. I'm sorry." A long pause. Then finally his voice. Deep, calm, measured. "I've heard worse." She smiled, awkwardly. "I used to play, a long time ago." He nodded, not challenging the silence between them. She hesitated. Did you study music? He looked at the piano, then back at her. Chopin wasn't meant for performance, he said. It was meant for prayer. She didn't know what to say to that, because no one had ever said it to her. Chopin, to her, had always meant technique, tension, applause, a strict father's nod, a mother's silence. It was perfection as punishment. She had never thought of it as prayer. That night, back in her apartment, she sat alone in the dark. She didn't turn the lights on. She didn't pour wine or change into silk. She walked into her music room, a pristine space she hadn't entered in years, and lifted the heavy lid of her baby grand. The keys were cool. She placed one finger on the middle C and pressed. The sound was brittle, too bright, too sharp. She pulled her hand back. In the reflection of the glossy lid, she saw herself, older, sharper, lonelier. She had been a girl once, sitting at this same piano, imagining concerts, dreaming of belonging to something larger than herself. And then life had happened. Labels, contracts, control. She had traded wonder for power. The next night, Malcolm returned as always, and this time something small had changed. On the lid of the piano, right above middle C, was a single smudge, a soft, circular mark, the size of a fingertip. He stared at it, then smiled, just slightly. Someone had touched the music, not to play it, but maybe just to say hello. She wasn't sure what she saw that night. But in the morning, she couldn't stop thinking about the smudge. The next morning, Sloane Wilder sat at her desk, a minimalist slab of obsidian stone that had cost more than a year's rent in most cities, and stared at the screen as if the numbers were speaking a different language. Profit margins, quarterly projections, artist attrition curves. None of it made sense today, because all she could see was the smudge. A perfect, faint oval, left by someone's fingertip on the polished lid of the piano. Hers, probably. Though she hadn't meant to leave it there. She hadn't even realized she'd touched the instrument until after the lights were off and she was in the elevator. But it had stayed with her. That one ghost mark. It was like a fingerprint from a past she no longer had permission to claim. She reached for her phone, paused, then typed, Malcolm Hayes. Age, family. The search turned up almost nothing. A LinkedIn page last updated in 2011 with a single line, musician, father. No company, no school, no photos. She scrolled further, a blurry newspaper clip from years ago. Finalist named in Montreal Piano Festival. The name Malcolm Hayes appeared once in a list of young talents. That was it. Then he vanished, like a note that never resolves. That evening, she returned to the lobby before the building fully cleared. It was quiet, just the hum of distant lights and the low murmur of the city bleeding through the glass walls. Malcolm was there, as expected, wiping down the bench now. Sloane didn't approach immediately. She just stood near the elevator and watched. There was a patience in the way he moved, a kind of dignity in silence. Like every gesture had a reason, even if no one noticed. Finally, she walked over. "Why do you clean it so carefully?" she asked. He looked up, no surprise in his face. "Because it still remembers music," he said, "even when people forget." She sat down on the opposite end of the bench. "I used to think music was just something to master," she said slowly. "Now I wonder if it was trying to teach me something the whole time." He said nothing, but she could feel his attention, not hungry or judging, just present. "Did you play in Montreal?" she asked, watching him carefully. His hand froze for a second over the edge of the bench. Then, "A long time ago. You disappeared." He nodded. "Why?" For a moment he didn't answer. The silence wrapped around them like a curtain closing. Then he spoke. "My wife died in 2010, he said softly. "Breast cancer, stage 4. We had a daughter. She was only 2. Sloane looked down, throat tightening. "I stopped playing," he continued. "Didn't make sense to anymore. Music didn't fix bottles or cook meals or stop nightmares." Her voice came quieter than she expected. "You didn't quit. You gave yourself to someone else." He blinked. She could tell. No one had ever said that to him before. And maybe no one had ever seen it that way. That night, she found herself outside his apartment. Not on purpose. She had asked for his address under the pretense of delivering documents from legal. But when she arrived, she didn't have anything in her hands. No envelope, no clipboard, just a soft knock on the door. It was a small place. On the 3rd floor of a walk-up with creaky stairs and potted plants by the neighbors' doors. Not at all what she expected from someone who once played concertos for panels of international judges. He opened the door. He didn't look surprised. "You want to see?" he asked simply. She nodded. Inside, the apartment smelled like cinnamon and wood polish. Books were stacked in small towers, a worn sofa near the window, a shelf of children's drawings, crayon hearts, stick figures with wild hair, music notes floating in the air. And in the center of the room, beneath the window light, a second piano. This one was older, chipped in places. The keys had yellowed unevenly with time. "I kept it," he said, "even when I sold everything else." Just then, a soft voice called from the bedroom. "Daddy?" Sloane turned as a young girl appeared, no older than 9, light brown curls, large eyes, and a cardigan covered in tiny embroidered stars. "This is Luna," Malcolm said. Luna looked at her shyly, then walked over to the piano. "You used to be a music lady too?" she asked Sloane. The question stunned her. Yes," she said. "A long time ago." Luna beamed, ran to a drawer, and returned with a spiral notebook. "These are the lullabies Daddy started," she said, flipping pages. "But some of them stop halfway, like the notes ran away." Sloane took the notebook gently. The pages were covered in careful pencil strokes, fragments of melodies, half-written measures, sudden stops. She paused at one. A beautiful minor progression, interrupted mid-phrase, then nothing. "Why did this one stop?" she asked. Malcolm walked over, looked at the page, then said quietly, "That was the one I was writing. The day she died." Sloane didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her fingers traced the pencil lines, gentle curves that ended in silence. Later, she stood outside his door, the city breathing around her, tears prickling behind her eyes. She realized she had been wrong. He hadn't stopped playing. He had just run out of room to hold everything. But now, maybe, just maybe, there was room again. Not for performance, not for applause, but for something even more sacred, for presence, for prayer, for a song unfinished. The gala stage was silent. Then her fingers froze halfway through a memory. The Andar Records. Winter Gala was a monument to elegance and ego. Held inside the soaring glass walls of the Lyra Theater, the stage glowed under soft amber lights, framed by white roses and a string quartet hired more for their looks than their precision. Champagne flutes sparkled like promises. Laughter rang out. Polite, practiced, hollow. Sloane Wilder stood near the edge of the mezzanine balcony, watching the room as one might watch a party from outside a window. She was wearing a black gown that shimmered as she moved, cut sharply at the collarbone, like armor stitched with silk. But she didn't feel powerful tonight, not since she saw the sheet music Luna had given her, not since she heard the ache in Malcolm's voice. Tonight, everything around her felt off-key. And then came the announcement. A senior board member took the stage, microphone in hand, beaming like a man who thought he still controlled the future. Our special performer for the evening has had an unfortunate accident. A skiing mishap, if you can believe it. But not to worry, he laughed. We have someone even better. Then he turned to the audience and said the 6 words that turned Sloane's stomach. Sloane Wilder will play for us. Laughter. Applause. The kind of applause you give when you assume someone's already said yes. She stared at him from across the room, eyes widening. He winked. Everyone turned. Someone handed her a drink, thinking it would help. It didn't. A minute later, she was backstage, seated in front of a grand piano, 1,000 eyes waiting. The lights were warm. The silence was suffocating. She placed her hands on the keys. She hadn't done this in years. Not seriously. Not in public. She closed her eyes and tried to summon the old muscle memory, the ancient discipline that once made her father proud. Her fingers began the opening of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. 3 notes in, something cracked. Not the keys, not the bench, something inside her. The memory came rushing back like a wave through a broken dam. A recital when she was 11. She had missed 1 note. Just 1. And her father had leaned forward from the audience and whispered to her afterward, "Do it again until it's perfect, or don't do it at all." The girl in her heart, the one who used to play with joy, curled up and disappeared. And now, 2 decades later, her adult hands trembled on that same battlefield. She hit a wrong chord. Then another. Silence. Embarrassed silence. She stood up, muttered an apology, something generic and formal, and walked off the stage without looking at anyone. The polite applause behind her felt like dry leaves rustling in a dead garden. She fled to the side hallway, heels clacking too loud on the concrete backstage floor. She wanted to scream, or cry, or vanish. Then she heard it. A piano. Not from the stage, from the far end of the service hallway, behind the black curtain separating staff from spectacle. She followed it, unsure if it was real. There, in a small side room, under dim maintenance lights, was Malcolm. Sitting at an old upright piano used by the theater crew for tuning sound systems. He was playing her piece, the same Nocturne, but not the version she'd just tried to force. His was slower, gentler, devotional. Like he was holding someone in his arms. He didn't look up when she entered, didn't stop. He just played, eyes closed. Not for performance, not for redemption, just because. When he finished, he sat in silence for a beat, then turned to her. She didn't speak. She didn't know how to. "Do you know," he said softly, "that the first time I ever played this, my wife cried?" She stepped closer. He gestured to the bench beside him. She sat. "You froze," he said, "on stage." "I forgot," she whispered. "No. You remembered," he corrected. "You remembered everything that hurt." She blinked, startled. He reached forward and gently tapped a single note on the piano, then placed her hand over the next one. "Try again," he said. Her hand shook. "I can't." He waited, not pushing, just present. Finally, she played one note, then another, then stopped. He filled the silence with the third. Together, they stitched something fragile, not the original piece, but something else, something unnamed, imperfect, human. At one point, she looked down at her own hand and whispered, "My left hand stiffens when I'm scared." He nodded. "So does your heart." They kept playing. Not for the room, not for the crowd, just for each other. When they finished, no one clapped. No one needed to. Because what they'd made wasn't for anyone else. It wasn't performance. It was prayer. Later that night, when the gala was over and the glitter was swept away, someone found Sloane's name card still resting on her empty table. On the back of it, scribbled in her handwriting, were 5 notes. The start of a melody. No words. No instructions. Just music. He was a finalist. Then he disappeared. No scandal. No reason. Just gone. Sloane Wilder was never one to chase ghosts, but something about Malcolm Hayes wouldn't leave her alone. Not his music, not his hands, not his stillness, and definitely not the way he played her failure, and turned it into something whole. 3 nights had passed since the gala. 3 nights, and she still hadn't slept properly. She kept hearing that room, that piano, that unspoken duet, not as memory, but as ache. On the morning of the 4th day, Sloane sat cross-legged on the floor of her home office, hair undone, laptop balanced on a velvet ottoman, digging through old records like a woman trying to solve a mystery no one else even noticed. She typed his name again. Malcolm Hayes. Same search results. Same silence. But this time, she added a year. Montreal Piano Festival 2005. There. A blurry scan of an old program leaflet. Her finger hovered over the list of finalists. Malcolm Hayes, United States, age 22. She scrolled, watched the winners rise over the years. In 2006, gone. No withdrawal announcement, no press. Just vanished. She cross-referenced music school alumni directories, no record, competition blogs, music teacher forums. It was like someone had erased him from the industry without even smudging the paper. She finally closed the laptop, sat back, and whispered aloud, "Who are you?" That night, she returned to the atrium again. Not for answers, for something more dangerous, for truth. Malcolm was there, as always, polishing the glass doors this time. She didn't wait. "I looked you up," she said softly. He stopped, slowly lowering the rag. "I found the Montreal program." He didn't move. "You were supposed to be something. Someone." Still, he said nothing. So she stepped closer, not with accusation, with care. "What happened?" A long pause. Then he set down the cloth and leaned gently against the wall. "My wife's name was Rachel," he said. "She had this little freckle on her right ear. I used to kiss it before shows." Sloane blinked. "She was diagnosed the week before my Carnegie audition," he continued. "I didn't go." The words fell like slow drops of rain on cold pavement. "She told me to go, but I couldn't." Sloane said nothing. She let silence do what sympathy often couldn't. She passed 9 months later. Luna was barely walking. I sold my piano, took whatever job I could find, first as night staff at a school, then hospital floors, then here. But Why never go back? She asked. His eyes drifted to the ceiling. Because the only stage I wanted to stand on was the one beside her hospital bed, and I already missed that finale. Sloane's throat closed. He looked at her, finally, not with sadness, but with stillness, as if the storm had already passed. She whispered, "So you didn't quit. You loved." He blinked slowly, as though no one had ever translated it like that. "Most people call it failure," he said. "I call it holy," she replied. He didn't smile, but something in him softened, like the taut string of a bow just after the final note is played. Later that week, Sloane did something she never did. She cleared her afternoon calendar. Not for investors, not for an artist crisis, but for something real. She took the subway to a quiet corner of the city, knocked on a wooden door with peeling paint and a sign that read, "Luna's Place, Family Daycare and Learning Center." Inside, she saw it. A small classroom, warm lights, construction paper stars hanging from the ceiling, and in the corner, Luna, hair in braids, gently tracing her fingers across a children's keyboard while other kids built blocks around her. The teacher noticed Sloane and walked over, a bit confused. "Can I help you?" Sloane smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you for letting someone so full of music grow up in peace." The woman tilted her head. "Luna's father is one of the kindest men I've ever met. He doesn't say much, but he brings her every morning with a song on his lips." That night, Sloane wrote a letter, but didn't send it. "Malcolm, I don't think you vanished. I think you stepped into the quiet because you had to. But there's a difference between disappearing and being hidden. Maybe the world didn't lose you. Maybe it just paused. And now, maybe, it's time to press play." Sloane. She folded it, tucked it into the back of her journal. She would wait. Because some music isn't forced. Some music waits for the moment the room goes still. She asked to see the inside of his world. What she found was music that never got to say goodbye. It was raining when she knocked on his door. Not storm rain, not angry or cinematic, just a steady drizzle that softened the world into hush. The kind of rain that made memory feel nearer than it should be. Malcolm Hayes opened the door without surprise. He didn't ask how she knew where he lived. Maybe he already knew she'd come. He stepped aside wordlessly, and Sloane entered for the first time into the quietness that held his life. The apartment was small, but not cramped. Lived in. There was warmth in the way the lamp near the window cast a golden halo across the room. Books lined the shelves in uneven stacks, not for display but for rereading. A cracked teacup held pencils on the coffee table. The kitchen was small but smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon balm. And in the corner, next to a large window that blinked softly with city lights, the piano. Old. Upright. The keys had that familiar worn ivory hue, touched by thousands of hours. There was a chair beside it with an afghan draped over the back. A photo frame stood on top of the piano, a woman with deep brown eyes and a laugh caught mid-breath. Rachel. "She taught me how to listen," Malcolm said quietly, noticing where Sloane was looking. "Not to music, to silence." Sloane nodded gently, afraid that speaking would tear something sacred in the air. Just then, from the hallway, came small footsteps, and then a voice. "Daddy, is she the music lady?" Sloane turned. Luna stood there barefoot, wearing pajamas with moons and stars. Her eyes, the same soft green-gray as her father's, sparkled not with suspicion, but curiosity. Malcolm chuckled softly. Yes, Luna. This is Miss Sloane. Luna stepped forward shyly, clutching a worn teddy bear with one arm, and extended the other to shake hands like a practiced diplomat. Sloane smiled and knelt to Luna's level. I've heard you like lullabies. Luna beamed. Daddy writes them, but some are still sleeping. Sleeping? Sloane tilted her head. Luna ran to a nearby drawer, dug inside, and returned with a notebook. Spiral-bound, its cover decorated with glitter stickers and doodles. She handed it to Sloane. These are his bedtime songs. He plays them when I can't sleep. Sloane opened the first page. Music. Real music. Handwritten, careful. No annotations, no lyrics, just lines and notes, delicate and deliberate. Each page was titled in Luna's handwriting, Lullaby for the Rain, for the girl who couldn't breathe, the one that floated. But some pages ended abruptly. No resolution, no repeat sign, no final measure. One in particular, Rachel's Last Night, stopped in mid-phrase, like a sentence with the last word choked back. Sloane's fingers lingered on that page. She didn't look up. Why didn't he finish it? She asked, voice almost inaudible. Malcolm stood behind her, watching. Because I didn't know how to say goodbye. Sloane turned to him. Their eyes met. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't hiding. He was simply telling the truth. And it broke her open in a place she thought had long since calcified. Later that evening, after Luna had gone to bed and the rain had quieted to a whisper, Sloane remained on the piano bench beside Malcolm. She opened the notebook again. Her fingers traced the unfinished lullaby. I don't think it needs an ending, she said. He looked at her, puzzled. She continued, Maybe some songs don't close. Maybe they stay open. Because love doesn't end. It just finds a new key. He nodded slowly. Then, without a word, he began to play. Not the unfinished one. Not Chopin. Not something rehearsed. Something new. Sloane didn't recognize it. But it didn't matter, because it was alive. She watched his hands move, like water remembering the shape of a riverbed. And after a while, she placed her hand beside his on the lower register. He paused, looked at her. Don't expect much, she whispered. I'm not, he replied. I'm listening. Together, they played, not in harmony, but in conversation. Call and response, memory and moment. When the song ended, there was no applause, just breath, and a kind of peace. Sloane left just past midnight, the notebook clutched in her coat. She didn't ask to take it. He didn't ask her to return it, because some music wasn't borrowed. It was shared. That night, she couldn't sleep, so she sat at her childhood piano, the one in her apartment no one else ever touched, and opened the notebook. She played Rachel's Last Night. Only this time, she added one more measure, just a single chord, soft, suspended. But it didn't say goodbye. It said, I'm still here. She sat at the keys, unsure. He joined, and the silence finally broke. The building was empty again. Midnight in the lobby of Andar Records felt like standing at the bottom of a dry ocean. All echoes, all stillness, all the ghosts of sound that once passed through. The security lights hummed gently above, and the piano waited. Sloane Wilder stood beside it, arms crossed, the spiral notebook pressed to her chest like a fragile truth. She hadn't planned to come back, but something in her fingers itched, not for perfection, not even for resolution, just connection. She placed the notebook gently on the lid and pulled the bench out with both hands, as if moving something sacred. She sat. Her hands hovered above the keys, unsure, trembling slightly. It wasn't stage fright this time. It was something deeper. What if I start and can't finish? What if the sound doesn't match the memory? What if silence is safer than trying again? She closed her eyes and pressed one note, then another. The sound wavered, not clean, not polished, but real. Then a third note joined hers, low, warm, and full. She turned her head. Malcolm had arrived. He said nothing, didn't ask, didn't wait. He simply sat down beside her and played. His left hand wove beneath hers, filling the empty spaces, grounding her flight. And together, they built something between them. Not a song anyone else had heard, but something they could both feel. A melody with no name, no history, only presence, only now. They played for 15 minutes, or maybe an hour. Neither of them checked the time. Somewhere in the middle she faltered. Her left hand froze. He waited, didn't correct, didn't fill in. Just let her pause. Then she whispered, "My left hand locks when I'm afraid." He nodded, still playing softly with his right. "So does your heart." She looked at him and smiled, not politely, but truthfully. When they finally stopped, the silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. "I didn't know I could still do that," she said, staring down at the keys. "You didn't forget," Malcolm replied. "You just didn't have someone to share the music with." She turned her head, surprised by the softness in his voice. He wasn't praising her. He was seeing her, and it undid something inside her that had been tightly wound for years. They sat there for a long time afterward, neither needing to speak. Eventually, Sloane reached for the notebook and flipped to the blank page after Rachel's last night. She wrote one word at the top: together. Malcolm glanced at it, then nodded, not as approval, as agreement. The next day, Sloane entered the Andar Records boardroom 5 minutes late. Unusual for her. She wore no makeup, her hair slightly windblown, her posture less rigid. She sat down, looked around at the faces she'd known for years, men in suits, eyes already flicking to their watches. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to propose something." They all turned. She placed the spiral notebook on the table. "Every year, we invest millions in chasing artists who already have millions of streams, but we forget the ones who never had the room, or the safety, to start." A pause. "I want to open a program, community-based, music-focused, for people who stopped playing because life got too loud." One board member scoffed. "With respect, Ms. Wilder, we're a label, not a charity." She smiled. "Yes, and maybe that's the problem." That night, she met Malcolm again in the lobby. He had brought Luna with him, the girl quietly humming and tiptoeing across the marble as if it were a stage made of clouds. Sloane bent down to Luna's height. "Would you help me name something?" she asked. Luna grinned. "Like a song?" "Like a school," Sloane said. "A place for music that never got finished." Luna thought for a moment, then said, "The song that never sleeps." Sloane blinked. It was perfect. Malcolm raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed, and something passed between the three of them. Not a contract, not a promise, but a melody, still unfolding. That night, they played again. No audience, no cameras, just a woman finding her voice again, a man remembering he never truly lost it, and a little girl watching, eyes wide, as music bloomed from hands once frozen by grief. The voicemail came at 2:14 a.m., short, breathless, half words. "Sloan, it's Luna. The hospital. She collapsed. They said, heart. I don't—" The rest was static. Sloan didn't even change out of her clothes. She grabbed her coat and keys with shaking hands, heart already racing faster than the city lights below her window. By 2:39 a.m., she was standing in the emergency room lobby, out of place in silk and heels, her throat dry, her fingers curled around the edges of her phone like it was a life preserver. No one had called her to come, but she had to be there. Because there are moments that don't wait for permission, only presence. Malcolm was sitting in the hallway just outside the pediatric ICU, his hands clasped, elbows on his knees, head bowed like someone trying not to fall apart in front of strangers. Sloan approached quietly, sat down beside him. He didn't look up. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Just the rhythm of machines behind glass. Finally, he whispered, "She couldn't breathe. She said it felt like thunder in her chest." Sloan closed her eyes. "She's stable now," he added. "But they said it's congenital, the valve. A risk we always knew about." "And the surgery?" "Soon, if she gains strength." He rubbed his palms together. "She's never been this quiet." Sloan reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the notebook. He stared at it, then her. "You brought that here?" She called it the songs that help her sleep. Maybe they still can. The nurse allowed them into the room just before dawn. Luna lay motionless, skin pale, hair pushed back under a gentle oxygen tube. Her hands were folded over the blanket, so small, smaller than Sloan remembered. There was a chair beside her bed, and beside that, an old hospital keyboard on a rolling tray, probably brought in for therapy sessions. Untouched. Malcolm looked at it for a long time, then at Luna, then slowly sat down. He placed his hands on the keys, not to play, just to feel. "I don't think I can," he said, voice rough. "Not like this." Sloan touched his shoulder. "Then let's not perform," she said. "Let's pray." He looked at her. She took a breath, sat beside him, and opened the notebook. They began to play. Not loudly, not cleanly. Just soft. Broken notes like whispering across cracked glass. First lullaby for the rain. Then for the girl who couldn't breathe. Then Rachel's last night. When they reached the page with the added final chord, Malcolm froze. He looked at her, eyes full of things he couldn't say. Sloan nodded once, then pressed the chord herself. A single, suspended note. And then a movement. Luna's hand. Just the fingers. Just a twitch. But it was enough. Later, the nurse would confirm it was real. That her brain was still responsive. That she heard them. Sloan stood beside Malcolm as the sun pushed pale light through the blinds. "You said I don't know pressure," she whispered. He turned to her confused. She continued, "You once told me I don't know what it's like to carry fear, but I do." He watched her, silent. "I once sat at a boardroom table with 40 men, all older, all richer, all waiting for me to break." "Did you?" She shook her head. "I gave them a smile. Then I gave them a 10-year plan they still use today." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You were playing a song, too." She nodded. "It just didn't have a piano." They stayed in that room for hours. No titles, no roles, no company names. Just a father, a daughter, and a woman who once thought music had left her. They played until Luna slept deeper, until her breath was steady, until their silence wasn't heavy anymore. Outside it began to rain again, but this time Sloane didn't feel alone under it. She felt like the music was holding her hand. The video was only 38 seconds long, but it burned down everything. It started with a whisper. A staff member at the hospital, maybe a night nurse, maybe a student volunteer, had paused outside room 402 at 5:11 a.m. Something about the sound coming through the door made them freeze. Not pain, not panic. Piano. Two people, playing together in the dim light, their backs to the door. One in a hospital gown, one in a wrinkled coat. The music was soft, imperfect, and unbearably human. The staffer filmed it quietly. Just 38 seconds. No captions, no hashtags, no commentary. And then they uploaded it with a simple title: Love Sounds Like This. By noon, it had been shared 10,000 times. By sunset, 2 million. The comments poured in. Is that CEO Sloane Wilder? That janitor looks familiar. Why is this the most honest thing I've ever heard? This isn't PR. You can't fake that look. And beneath all that, debates, speculation, gossip. CEO falls for janitor? Single father plus power exec, music of the people? Staged? Scandal? Bravery? Fire her. Hire her again. She's in love. She's lost her mind. But through all the noise, the music kept playing, and the world leaned closer. Sloane saw the clip 3 hours after it went viral. She was still at the hospital, curled in a plastic chair beside Luna's bed, when her phone buzzed once, twice, 30 times. She opened the first message, then the next. Her face drained of color. "Malcolm," she whispered. "We're everywhere." He looked up from where he sat by the window. Then she held out the phone. They watched it together, the moment that wasn't meant to be seen. Her fingers, his hands, the soft chords, Luna's slight movement at the end. Captured, released. And now, out of their hands. The call from the board came 2 hours later. A concerned and urgent virtual meeting was scheduled for the next morning. The media was waiting outside Andar Records before dawn. Reporters shouted, "Miss Wilder, is the relationship romantic? Do you plan to resign? Was this a publicity stunt? Is the janitor being promoted? Can we speak to the child?" She said nothing. She stood taller, but inside, she was breaking again. Not because they found out, but because they turned something so private, so sacred, into noise. The meeting room was full. Every executive board member was present, even the ones who only attended twice a year. Old men, sharply dressed women, legal teams, communications consultants. Sloane entered in black slacks and a simple blouse. No jewelry, no makeup, no armor, just truth. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "We want to give you the opportunity to address what the world has seen." Sloane stood at the head of the table, the notebook in her hands. "Most of you saw a video," she said. "I lived it." Silence. "I didn't plan to fall in love with music again, or with a man who reminded me what silence can mean, or with a child who made me remember why I ever played in the first place." More silence. A board member coughed. "You understand the optics." She held up her hand. "I'm not here to defend optics. I'm here to defend feeling." Then she placed the notebook on the table. "These songs, these unfinished, quiet, healing pieces, are more honest than anything we've produced in years." One man leaned forward. "Are you resigning?" Sloane paused, then nodded. "I am." Gasps. "But not because I'm ashamed. I'm resigning because I'm no longer afraid." She walked out of the boardroom and left behind the company she built. No press release, no statement, no deal. Just peace. That evening, Malcolm met her outside the hospital. Luna had just fallen asleep after another stable scan. He stood quietly, unsure of what to say. She looked up at him. "I didn't do it for you," she said, "or because of you. I know. I did it for the girl I used to be, the one who stopped playing because applause started mattering more than sound." He reached for her hand, and for the first time, she let someone hold it without letting go first. That night, the three of them sat in the hospital room. No keyboard, no performance, just 3 chairs, and the soft hum of a child's heartbeat monitor. Sloane sang a lullaby this time. Her voice cracked. She forgot the second verse, but Luna smiled in her sleep, and Malcolm whispered, "It's perfect." She left her kingdom behind, then offered him a stage. The invitation was handwritten, just 7 words on thick white cardstock, delivered to Malcolm's apartment by courier on a rainy afternoon. One night only. For Luna. For love. SW. No logo, no letterhead, no RSVP deadline, just a place, Lincoln Chapel, and a time, Saturday, 7 p.m. Malcolm stared at it for a long time, then turned to Luna, curled up on the couch with a coloring book in her lap. "She wants me to play," he murmured. Luna looked up. "You should." He blinked. "I haven't performed in 15 years. "You've played for me," she said, matter of fact. "That's different." She shrugged. "Then pretend the room is full of me." And went back to coloring stars with a purple crayon. Lincoln Chapel sat at the edge of the city. Old stone, stained glass, and a piano so delicate it had to be tuned 3 times a month. It was where composers once came to pray through their hands, where broken people went to remember what still held beauty. That night, the pews filled with strangers, not executives, not critics. People, mothers with children who had heart murmurs, old musicians who never got their moment, teenagers with notebooks full of half-written songs. Some had come because of the viral video. Some had come because they needed something. All had come for music that didn't belong to stages anymore, only to healing. Backstage, Malcolm paced. His hands were trembling, not with fear, but with weight. The weight of memory, of expectation, of grief and grace, tangled in every note. Sloane walked in, dressed in quiet black, holding a simple gold pin in her hand. "From Rachel's shawl," she said gently. "I had it made into this." He stared at it, moved beyond words. She stepped forward and pinned it to his lapel. "You once asked me what happens if you fail," she said. He nodded. She smiled. "Failing in front of someone who loves you is the safest kind of beginning." When Malcolm stepped onto the chapel stage, the room did not erupt into applause. It hushed, the way people fall silent at a funeral, or a birth, or a moment too sacred to interrupt. He sat, closed his eyes, and played. Not fast, not loud, not with flash or flourish, just honesty. Like the music had been hiding behind a locked door in his chest for years, and now, Someone had found the key. There was no set list, no introductions, only story. He played Rachel's last night. He played The Girl Who Couldn't Breathe. He played Together, the piece he and Sloane had written between silences. And then he paused. The chapel held its breath. He leaned forward, fingers hovering over the final piece. "This one," he said softly, "was written for someone who didn't ask to be brave, but became my strength anyway." He looked into the crowd, found her, small frame, big eyes, sitting next to Sloane in the front pew. "Luna." He began, and the song that followed was not written in any notebook. It was built from all the moments between: hospital hallways, spilled tea, broken nights, whispered lullabies, held hands, unsent letters, and one child who had never stopped believing her father was still a musician. The piece ended on a note suspended so long it seemed the room had forgotten to breathe. And then, nothing. No clapping. Just tears, because applause felt too small. Afterward, as the crowd slowly dispersed, a reporter approached with a mic. Malcolm held Luna's hand tightly. Sloane stepped between them. "No statements," she said. "This wasn't a comeback. It was a conversation." Then she looked down at Luna, who smiled up at her. "She heard you tonight," Sloane said to Malcolm. He looked at his daughter, tears in his eyes, and replied, "No, she is the music." Outside, the chapel bell rang once as the city folded into darkness. And for the first time in years, Malcolm Hayes didn't flinch at the sound of endings, because he knew what was coming next. Wasn't silence, but another beginning. The girl asked, "Will you play it again, Daddy?" And this time, he said yes. The morning after the concert, the city was quiet. Not because anything had changed, but because someone had. Malcolm Hayes stood in his kitchen in a soft gray shirt, barefoot on cool tiles, pouring 2 mugs of cocoa, one for himself, one for Luna. The old piano in the corner still wore the scent of the night before. Memory, touch, music that refused to die. Luna shuffled in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She blinked up at her father. "Will you play it again?" He paused. Her voice wasn't pleading, just open, honest, like always. "Yes," he said, then smiled. "Yes, I will." Sloane stood outside the newly leased space, a converted music school with peeling walls and floors that groaned under weight they hadn't carried in years. There were no chandeliers, no plaques, just old upright pianos, chipped music stands, and one sign in the front window, "The Song That Never Sleeps. A Place to Play Again." Inside, the walls were being painted by volunteers, artists, nurses, janitors, a retired conductor, and even a teenager who once tried to burn her own sheet music after failing an audition. Sloane didn't stand above them. She painted with them, one wide arc at a time. No titles, no press, just presence. The foundation grew faster than expected, maybe because it wasn't built on promises, but on pauses, on the kind of silence people don't get to have in busy lives. Luna came every week. She helped teach other children how to count measures by clapping. She taught a 5-year-old how to hum to calm her own heart. And sometimes, when no one was watching, she climbed onto the bench beside her dad, pressed one note, then another, and looked up at him. Every time, he said the same thing. "Again?" And every time she said, "Yes." Months later, at the winter recital, the chapel filled again. But this time, the stage was not reserved for professionals. It belonged to survivors, a woman in her 60s who hadn't played since losing her son, a young boy on the autism spectrum who played only 3 notes, but played them like they mattered, a veteran who wrote a piece called Echoes I Never Got to Answer. And then Luna. She walked on stage with quiet feet and bright eyes, sat at the bench, looked into the audience, found her father's gaze, and played one simple lullaby. Rachel's lullaby. Finished. Whole. Alive. Sloane wept silently. Not because of what she heard, but because of what she saw. A girl who had nearly left the world, now giving it back music. After the recital in the courtyard behind the chapel, the 3 of them stood beneath fairy lights and soft falling snow. Luna danced in small circles, arms out like wings. Malcolm reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Sloane blinked. "I don't have a speech," he said, opening it. Inside, not a ring, a key to the foundation. "I don't want to lead it without you," he said. She looked at him, eyes stinging. "And I don't want to build anything else unless it starts with you." She took the key and his hand, and Luna reached up, placing hers over both. They didn't take a honeymoon. They didn't send a press release. They didn't buy a mansion. They stayed in the apartment with the old piano. They walked Luna to school. They laughed when the power went out and lit candles and turned silence into song. Because they knew. Music was not made from noise. It was made from presence, and prayer, and memory, and love. Years later, a new student stepped into the foundation's hallway, nervous, small, holding nothing but silence in his hands. He asked, "What if I don't know how to play?" Luna, now older, smiled from behind the reception desk. "You don't need to," she said. "Just sit and listen." And the boy did. And in the stillness, a song began. Thank you for staying with us through every note of this story. This wasn't just a love story between 2 unlikely souls. It was a healing journey, where music wasn't a performance, but a home. Malcolm didn't need a title to be called an artist. Sloane didn't need a boardroom to know her worth. And Luna, little Luna, reminded us all that sometimes unfinished songs are only waiting for someone to listen long enough to be completed. We hope this story touched something quiet and soft within you. Maybe you once sat in front of an old piano and said nothing. Maybe life got too loud and you folded a dream away. But like Luna asked, will you play it again? If your heart still stirs at the memory of something beautiful, then the answer is yes. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for letting this story sing inside you. Even just for a little while. The end. But the song, as always, never sleeps.